Hello, and welcome to Felt Matters, a brand new podcast on all things felting, brought to you by the education team of the International Feltmakers Association. And we're your hosts, and both keen feltmakers. I'm Vivienne Morpeth, coming to you from sunny Lincolnshire in England.
And I'm Heather Potten, in the lovely city of Edinburgh in Scotland. Before we get started, we'd like to tell you just a little bit about us. And when I say us, I mean the International Feltmakers Association. Whether you're a seasoned feltmaker, are at the beginning of your felting adventure, or have just popped in to see what we're all about, you'll find we have a lot to offer. Our website at www.feltmakers.com has an extensive gallery of feltmakers and their websites, an events section where you can find felting workshops and exhibitions, both in person or online, and our own mentored Discovering Feltmaking courses. There's so much more that I won't mention now, so why not have a look for yourself? After this episode, of course. And follow us on Instagram and Facebook for the latest updates. One of our features in the podcast is Vivienne's Felt on the Shelf, and we have an extensive book list on the website for you to browse through to find useful books on feltmaking. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you'll find this podcast and a range of feltmaking videos. But that's just a selection. Become a member of the International Feltmakers Association and log on to the members area on the website. There, you can access all our specially commissioned videos, talks and conversations with acclaimed feltmakers such as Fiona Duthie, Annemie Kernan, Wendy Bailey, Judith Porch and so many others. Last but definitely not least, our journal, Felt Matters. Members receive 4 issues a year, but there's so much more to explore. In another of our regular features, I dip into the archives. As a member, you too can lose yourself in this comprehensive collection of journals going back to 1986. And there you have it. Resources, inspiration, and a sprinkling of magic, all at your fingertips. But while you're here, why don't we get on with the show?
So Heather, let's talk about how we started this podcast, because it all began from an idea. I love listening to podcasts. I listen to a big range, and I've been listening to knitters talking with great enthusiasm and sewing podcasts and a lot of wellness and different kind of small business podcasts, but I couldn't find anything about felt making. And yet we're quite a big community and we have a really active association and a wonderful journal, but we don't have many opportunities to hear conversations about people making felt and conversations between felt makers. And of course, we're both really passionate felt makers as well.
Well, I think one of the things that interested me as well is that we've talked about the pandemic previously. And one of the things that changed dramatically for the International Feltmakers Association was that a lot of our interaction with our members went online. So as I was part of the committee at the time and the communications officer, we hosted our first ever online AGM. And part of the online AGM was commissioning feltmakers to make videos for our members. And so at that time, we started a YouTube channel, and it was the first time that we had any kind of recordings that were specifically for us by feltmakers and for feltmakers. So in my opinion, I think when you said, let's do a podcast, it seemed like such a natural progression.
Absolutely. And I've always joked with people that ask me, what is felt? I always joke and say, well, it's very niche. But actually, when you're in the niche, it's very big. We're quite a large community and we expand worldwide. And we were saying earlier about how we've actually only met in person at one of the International Feltmakers Association conferences. And now, as you say, they're online. So there's opportunities to meet people totally out of your normal location, because it's great to go to workshops, and the really good thing is there are workshops happening again now, but whether people are travelling long distances for those workshops is still a bit uncertain.
I agree, and I think not only the distance involved, but the cost involved.
Yes.
Things have become more expensive. Travel, I mean, we're both in the UK. The UK is a relatively small country, and yet getting from A to B can be quite difficult because of trains not being great or the roads and so on. And I know for myself, I haven't been, well, no, that's not true. I went to Felt School in Wales in February, which was wonderful, but that was the first thing I'd been to for well over a year. And I miss that.
Yes. And I think it's just hearing people chatting felt. And you came back from the felt school and you told me about these conversations you'd had with people. And it really sets us up. It kind of inspires us, warms our hearts, just feeling this connection with humanity and talking about something that we can really obsessively talk about for hours, if not days. Because how long was felt school?
Well, Felt School was 4 days, and it could have been,
there you go.
It could have been twice that, and it would have been still a wonderful experience. And yes, it does keep you going up to a point, and then, the sort of joy of it fades away a little bit. So it is nice to be able to plug into other people talking and just listen to ideas and thoughts and different ways of seeing things.
I think so. And you feel part of that community. Because it's great to read information, but to hear people talk and the little asides in the conversations as well make it really interesting. And I hope that it encourages other people to kind of reach out and talk to other felt makers.
Yes. And I suppose one of the things about felt making that I know that when I'm talking, as you say, to people that don't know anything about felt making, their perceptions of what it is are perhaps quite limited. So they may have one experience of felt making, but they don't know about all the other incarnations, whether it be, 2D, 3D, needle felting. There are so many different ways
Oh
that
my
you can
goodness.
be, that you can be involved.
I used to joke and say the only thing I've not made out of felt is a bikini. And then I went to an exhibition in Hungary. There was a bikini in the exhibition, a felt bikini. And so I've had to revise that one. But I think the thing about a podcast is it's a friendly word in your ear, really, isn't it? And you can start listening to it. You can stop when you want. You can go forward. You could go backwards, and you can listen when you're walking the dog, making felt, doing the dishes. It's a really easy platform to access your community.
Well, that's true. That is very true. And I think the other thing about podcasts is that we can make them in our own home. I mean, I'm in Edinburgh at the moment in my studio, and you are not.
No, I mean, I literally am in sunny Lincolnshire because the sun's bathing in through the window at the moment. And I'm surrounded by wool and bags of wool. But yes, so we're able to communicate. We're in a virtual studio chatting to each other. And we can see each other, which is quite nice. We've both got our headphones on and our microphones plugged in. So we mustn't forget and suddenly jump up.
We are very professional, very professional.
Absolutely. But with a few technical requirements, tools, and self-teaching of the skills, here we are.
Yes, indeed. Being in a workshop surrounded by other felt makers is really quite an exciting thing. And that's where I am today. I'm at Model House in Llantrisant in Wales, surrounded by other women, all interested as I am in felt making. Our tutor is Mandy Nash, who many of you will know from having been on the IFA committee for many years. And this is about the 4th or 5th time that I've come to Felt School in Wales. So what's on my table right now? Well, my favourite colours for a start. Turquoise, orange, blue, silks. So I've laid down a resist. I've put the silks down on top of that resist. And I'm going to be making myself a Nuno felt hat, which is very exciting because none of the hats I've ever really made for myself in the past have been something that I would wear.
Heather, it was great to hear about your felt on the table at Felt School, but I haven't actually seen what you made.
No, I know. And now it's the summer, so of course I'm not wearing it, but it's this. So this
Oh,
is,
wow.
yeah, this is my Nuno felt hat.
Oh,
And
that's stunning.
thank you. Yes, I was really pleased with it because I'm not very good at making hats, but it used a technique that I particularly enjoy for surface design.
Oh, yes.
And that is to lay down the surface design first. So I wondered if you would be interested in hearing my top tip for surface design in
Oh, yes,
reverse.
absolutely.
Okay, right. So here's one I prepared earlier. So I don't know if you remember, but certainly when I was up in Edinburgh during lockdown, one of the sort of symbols of kind of hope and togetherness was the rainbow. I don't know if that was the same where you live.
Yes, it was quite big in England, and it was really nice because we saw kids chalking it out on the pavements and things.
Yes. So my idea was not to do anything by halves, was to make a felt rainbow, and
Oh,
I
wow.
wanted it to be large enough to hang above my door because I've got a sort of old Victorian house which has a window above the door, and there were two very handy hooks that I think must have had a house name attached to them at one point. So I thought I would make a rainbow that would be suspended from those hooks above my front door.
Gosh, that sounds very ambitious.
It turned out to be, yes. So, yes, here it is. You can see that it is quite large. In fact, it's
Oh,
bigger
that's
than I am.
beautiful.
And obviously, as a felt maker, we all know that that started a great deal larger than this.
Of
Um,
course, gosh, that must have been about a metre and a half
yeah, it was,
in
well,
length.
well, I think we talk about our tables quite often, and this was definitely limited by the size of the table. But the other thing that I love about this is that it is my favorite stash busting technique because I know that a lot of people's stash involves lots of fibers.
Yeah.
And that's true. But my stash involves an awful lot of failed projects.
Oh, I think we all have that bit too. We just don't talk about it.
Yeah, well, so I've got a big box full of scarves that I didn't like or that didn't sell, and bags and samples and, all sorts of things. And what's interesting is that no matter how well they've been fooled, unless they're absolutely rock solid, they will felt more. And I
Yeah.
think that is why when I made the rainbow, which is one of the techniques that I use a lot, if it's very, very lightly felted, pre-felt, it doesn't work nearly as well as if it is fairly well felted.
Proper stuff, yes.
Yeah, because if it's not really well felted, then it will just kind of blur into, all the other colors. So if you want to do something like this, and the rainbow is great because then you're using up virtually every color. And obviously, if you tend to work in more natural fibers, then you'll have a more naturally graded rainbow than
Yes.
I than mine.
Oh,
But
that's
I
interesting. So you don't just have to have a rainbow. You could just have a grade of almost 7 shades
Yes.
or
Yeah,
total colour?
absolutely.
That's interesting. That's
Yes,
very
absolutely.
original. Yeah.
Absolutely. And also I think my color, luckily, because a rainbow starts, as far as I'm aware, at least the way my rainbow worked is that the largest arch is the red one
Mm.
and the smallest is the purple.
Yes.
But obviously, if you happen to work in different styles of color and you don't have so much of any color, then obviously you can do it any way you like. So the first thing to do is to go into your stash, which is always just a nice thing anyway. You're just kind of putting your hands into a nice woolly basket and pulling things out and remembering the things that you made, years ago. And I tend to cut them into strips first and then chop them up into mosaic tiles. So the mosaic tiles would be square or oblong. You could obviously do it in circular shapes, but A, it takes longer to cut them all out. And B, you've got But it's interesting. I mean, you can work with circles, any shape, but all fairly regularly the same size. So you've got these strips, and then you divide them out into the colors, and you can put them into bowls or bags or put them onto plates so that you've got all the colors laid out and ready. So it's your recipe. If you're an organized chef, that cook, then that's what you do, isn't it? You get all your spices and put them into bowls. So you get all those. And then what I do is I use the styrofoam that I use for resists. So I don't know what you use for resist material.
I use underfloor laminate.
So that's styrofoam. Yes.
3 millimeter. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I did was, obviously, as I said, I looked at the size of my table and I cut out an arch as large as I could fit onto the table.
Yes.
And then I drew 6 arched lines to divide it into 7 sections. So you put down your towel, your bubble wrap, and then you put the resist material as a template on top of that. Then you get your warm soapy solution and you cover the entire surface of the styrofoam resist or template with this soapy water.
Yes.
So it's quite well. Oh, sorry. Before that, I forgot to mention. Did I mention marking out the lines? I did, didn't I?
You did, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Well, yeah. We've got 7.
Yes, 7 arches.
6 lines. Yes.
6 lines, 7 arches, and you've now covered it all with soapy water. And then you start laying out your tiles face down.
Of course.
Yes. So you put them face down according to the colorways and cover the entire arch or the entire rainbow with all your colored tiles face down. And then you can put on top of that, you can wet this down, but don't do any massaging at this point. And then lay out 2 layers or more, depending on how thick you want it. This is actually quite substantial, but I did only put 2 layers of single colored merino on the top.
Yes.
I say merino, that's what I use, but it can be any kind of wool that you like. And I tend to use black because I think when black comes through the colors, it makes them more dynamic, but you could use any color at
That's
the back.
interesting. Yes.
And then you wet it all down and you do your normal massaging. And I kind of scooch the black around the edge into, the tiles. So
yes.
And then you carry on with your normal felting. But because you've put down the pre-felts in at the beginning and they have been absorbing the moisture and the soap from underneath as well, I find that I would say 99% of your pre-felts, no matter how well they were originally felted, will adhere to the backing.
That's really interesting because quite often I find that I card the back of quite thick pre-felts if I want to use them again. Just so that they're fluffy.
Yes.
But do you find that you didn't need to because you'd soaked them and they'd got a head start?
No, I would say if I look at it now, there's one piece that's lifting up slightly and that's a really solid piece of pre-felt. And I would say, hand on heart, I probably had to put a couple of stitches in the whole piece and that was it. Everything else worked really well.
That's a real quick way then.
Yes, it is. So yeah, that's my top tip for how to create surface design in reverse.
Fantastic. And so how did that link into your hat then?
Well, the fact that I had put the silk down first for the hat and then the wool on top of that, so that when the hat is actually finished, you just turn it inside out and for doing all the shaping.
Yes. And then so the wool migrates into the silk because it's actually traveling downwards. There's a bit of gravity involved as well.
I reckon that's possibly true.
Well, that's my take on it.
Yes, okay.
When I do that. But yeah, they both look beautiful, Heather. I was interested to hear about how you even thought of your felting table as being something of such an interesting feature, which of course it is. Now we've reflected on it, but I was wondering where that had come from.
Well, before we started this, I thought I would just go and measure my kitchen counter and give you an idea of where I started felting, apart
Yes.
from the workshops that I attended. But when I was first started, there wasn't enough space in the house to felt, and I didn't have a studio or anything like that. So I've just measured my kitchen counter, and it is 1 meter wide, 60 deep, and 90 high. So that
Wow.
means that I could actually turn the tap on and switch on the light at the same time.
And what did you make?
Well,
Did it restrict you?
yes,
I
of
thought,
course it restricted me, but then my lack of knowledge restricted me. And also because I did do workshops. When I started felt making, the workshops that I attended were not really that good. I only realized that, many years later.
you
But
didn't have the Sheila Smith opportunity then.
I did not have the Sheila Smith opportunity. So although I was being taught by a very talented person, that person's first job wasn't felting. And so we did 2-hour workshops during which we were given a demonstration and then had to create that item within the 2 hours.
Right.
So needless to say, the things that I was producing then, although they were bright and colorful and they were still inspiring me to felt, they weren't particularly good. And so I thought, well, I've only got a small space. What shall I do? So I used to make a lot of collars.
Oh, yes. Yes. Lovely.
Well, if I look at those collars now, have all been I actually sold quite a lot of them, which I'm almost embarrassed to say now, because I think the colors and the ideas and the motivation behind them was all wonderful, but the felting technique was not the
I
best.
think a lot of us have done that, though. I think it's part of helping us to grow. People love our work and we make more and then we learn.
We do, but sometimes it takes a while for the penny to drop.
Yes.
Anyway, so yes, so I would lay out, the bubble wrap and all the rest of it on my kitchen counter, and I would make the biggest neckwear that I could. And then I would, make buttonholes and use fancy shell buttons and so on. And for a while they sold really well. And then I also made a lot of corsages and brooches. So, I was able to do that. So I suppose then when it came to actually getting a studio, because I had persuaded my best friend to come to classes with me, and we decided to get a studio. And obviously one of the first things that we thought about is you have to have tables. And so our tables were very basic. We're just the sort of picnic tables that you buy in Costco. I think they're probably about 30 quid each.
Oh, yes.
The kind that you fold and you can take to craft fairs. Yeah, exactly. And also, of course, they're waterproof. And I was lucky enough to have, in the studios that we had, we were just in long corridors, and opposite me was a luthier. You know what a luthier is?
No.
He made guitars and bouzouki and mandolins. So he was an instrument maker. But previous to that, he'd been a furniture maker as well. And he was full of great ideas on how to just do anything with wood. And so I told him about our tables and that we needed them to be higher, because I was obviously used to now working with kitchen counter, which is 90 centimeters, and it's an ideal height. So he constructed these razors, which I still have. And so that's why I guess, and then sort of the final incarnation, I suppose, is that now I work from home and the studio's gone, unfortunately. And the table is now in my conservatory. And
but that's still flexible and you can put it up wherever you need it.
Well, theoretically, yes, I could, but actually I don't anymore. We had 2 tables and I've now sold one of them to somebody in the sewing class who needs one in her house. And so my felting table with its razors, which are now looking a little bit sad, but nonetheless still work, takes pride of place in the conservatory.
Perfect. Yes, I never got into wooden razors. I didn't have that opportunity with somebody who was handy with wood. I used tin cans, so tins of beans at one point, and then piles of books, but of course that doesn't go with wet felting. And then I ordered some table razors, but I must have ordered them from a care site, and a couple of days after they arrived, I got a phone call from this care site asking me if I needed any other care support things. And I had to sort of, make it up a bit on the spot and say, oh no, table race is just super. Yes, it really raises the bed nicely. I don't need any more, thank you.
I think, your production is sort of dictated by your table. Would you agree with that?
I think so, yes. I mean, I like a sturdy wooden table, but when I'm making a jacket, I've got a couple of tables like yours, similar to the sounding of yours, and I get them out. But, when you're making a jacket all in one and you've got a pattern, it can be about 3 meters, maybe even 3.5 meters, cuff to cuff. And so I've discovered that an ironing board is really good for stretching out an arm. And because you can raise it to different heights, you can get it to be the same height as your table.
Right.
And so whenever you need to fold out an arm to, lay out more wool or rearrange it or something, I get the ironing board and I pop it up next to the arm and then fold the arm back in across the chest.
Right. So, and that it doesn't get too wet?
I put a cover over it. I mean, it is a bit long-suffering.
Yes.
But needs must, felt a priority in my mind.
Exactly. And, the other problem that I had was that when I had a studio, I was able to teach in my studio and I could teach maybe 4 people at a time. And that was quite good. And now that I'm back in the house with only one table, I'm really limited to 1-to-1 or maybe 2-to-1 at the most. So I think that's probably why I thought, well, actually the table, yes, of course, it's nice to have lots of other bits of equipment, but felt making without a table or at least a flat surface doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't. I mean, I was thinking, gosh, well, there are other things that you do need. You need nice lighting or day lighting, access to water, of course.
Yeah.
So that you don't have to walk too far, and a surface underneath the table so that you can mop it up. Although I have done lots of felting on carpets as well. And sometimes it's quite nice to have a view.
Oh, it's lovely to have a view. Absolutely. Yeah.
Which on a kitchen counter may not be the case.
Well, I've got very colourful tiles on my... But no, that I think is why my table now is just right for me, because I just look in the garden. I've got a very small garden, but at the moment it's full of sort of creamy colour, white and yellow. Just everything seems to have come out at the same time. And there are bird feeders out there as well. And so I'll be in the middle of a conversation with somebody or doing something, then all of a sudden I'll just, there's a blue tit. Oh, there's a, and it's that makes my heart sing, literally.
And have you tried felting in the garden? I take those fold-out tables outside, and I felted. I mean, it's great for eco rugs, obviously, which are you're working with raw wool, and it's all very manky, the water, so it just washes off. But it's also really lovely to felt outside, although the tiniest breeze will ruck up merino wool if you do very precise layout.
Yes, and obviously the sort of Mongolian felt makers, it's all outdoors, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think ideally it would be a great outdoor sport, but practically from my point of view, it doesn't really happen.
Yeah, so, and I suppose in different cultures, felt isn't even done on a table.
No,
it's done on the ground, and you're down on your hands and knees, whereas we like to sit or stand.
I nearly always stand, unless my back's getting sore. But in general, I find standing is better. I mean, obviously not everybody likes to stand, but when I'm teaching, I look at people's posture, and if I feel that they're bending forward a lot, I can tell that by the end of the session, they're going to really hurt. So I usually give a few suggestions on perhaps bending your knees or sitting down at certain points, but not just leaning forward. And I'm always aware of backache because I've got a back injury myself.
Felt matters to me. It's the process. It's taking time to think about who I'm making something for, and thinking about them, and that influences the work that I make. I'm a hobby felter, and so I tend not to do very much. But when I do, it's also a leveller. It's a slower process for me than everything else I do in the rest of my life.
Thanks, Carey. It's fascinating to hear how you find felt making a leveller to everything else that you do in life. And Heather, gosh, where would we be without table raisers? And we'd definitely be suffering from backache in the felting community. So thanks for sharing that with us. And in the meantime, it's goodbye from Heather and myself. Until our next episode of the podcast, where felt matters.
This podcast is brought to you by the education team of the International Feltmakers Association. Conceived, hosted and produced by Vivienne Morpeth and Heather Potten. Editing by Heather Potten. Music by R.T. Williams. Graphics by Rafaela Morpeth.
If, like us, you'd like to hear more from our amazing felting community, subscribe at the end of this episode. It helps other creatives to find us, and each episode will drop into your podcast platform for you to enjoy.